Star Wars is a franchise that has been bringing in new fans for almost 50 years. With such a long-running intellectual property, it's only natural that there are going to be high and low points across the many decades of content, which came in many forms, be that movie, TV shows, books, or even comics and games. So in this video, we'll take a look at the 10 eras of the Star Wars franchise and look at the many highs and, as sad as it is to say, the lows within the fandom. The OT era. The original trilogy set the world on fire and introduced the world of Star Wars with a bang. Although it was uncertain whether or not the film would be successful enough to justify a sequel, George proved the doubters wrong by captivating the minds of both children and adults with his specialist team's incredible effects work and sound design. The original trilogy has this vintage vibe to it. Everything which doesn't belong to the Empire is dirty, feels lived in, used and authentic. The vintage feeling paired with the incredible attention to detail makes the film some of the best to this day, standing up exceptionally well even compared to modern releases. This is where it all began, and this is where many fans still today had their start in the Star Wars fandom. Sadly though, this group of fans is starting to drop off now as they get older, and in general as the new content that Star Wars is putting out today doesn't really align with what their interests showed and what they liked back in those days. The Marvel Dark Age. This era begins actually during the OT era, but really kicks into gear after the release of Return of the Jedi. Marvel had the rights to the Star Wars comics, which were released at the time of the original trilogy. Comics at the time were more like fun adventures of the week rather than the deep story arcs that we see nowadays from the big names like modern Marvel and DC. This meant that although there were some interconnected stories, it was basically just lots of random stuff which the writers made up, most of which was later retconned. Some of these stories have even been adapted and referenced in the modern Star Wars canon, but many of them were forgettable, didn't make much sense, and some of them were just downright crazy. These are usually considered the lowest tier of canon content in the Legends hierarchy, which had the tiers of canon, because of how much information was later overwritten by other books, novels, and of course, other movies. These comics alone, however, weren't enough to keep the hype of Star Wars flowing, and the fans started to feel burned out as the brand fell into obscurity after the original trilogy. It wasn't dead yet, but losing life at a frightening pace. But then, there arrived a series of novels so impactful and widely read that they still influence the franchise directly to this day. The Thrawn Renaissance. The Thrawn trilogy, written by Timothy Zahn, was essentially the first official continuation of the original trilogy, and fans devoured these books like they were full movies. The cinematic and suspenseful tale of a newly established New Republic being challenged and oftentimes defeated by the organized remnants of the Galactic Empire led by the greatest mind to be created in the Star Wars universe, pulled in so many fans that it is solely credited for the hype being brought back to Star Wars before the prequels. Released in the 90s, these books built a fan base which was incredibly excited for the future of Star Wars and would soon come in a way that nobody could expect, not even George himself. The prequel hype. The prequels were an extremely divisive set of movies, and George took on a more child-focused adventure which still contained serious topics and themes, but contained far more silly humor than legacy fans were used to. This led to many interviews with disappointed fans who hated episodes 1 to 3 and swore off the franchise forever. They were an extremely vocal minority, however, and most of the people who attended were families and the younger audience who loved the movies. Love or hate them, these movies ushered in a massive wave of tie-in video games, books, comics, which kept the young fans engaged for years in a way that Marvel struggled to after the original trilogy. The 2003 Clone Wars show was an amazing animation which catered to a lot of the fans disappointed by episodes 1 and 2, which were more kid-friendly, whilst the Dark Lord trilogy of novels provided lovers and haters of the films a way to finally fully understand the dramatic fall of Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker. As the years went on, the younger fans grew up and became more vocal about their love for the prequels, partially leading to George starting up a new project, the Clone Wars era. The main content for Star Wars fans for many years, the Clone Wars is a kind of golden age for many fans who started to receive a new batch of books and comics tying into this show, which featured some pretty deep stories considering it was made for kids. We also with this had toys, magazines, and so many tiny little stories which you wouldn't even know exist today, but they were found in the tiniest crevices of magazines that you would find in shops, book covers, comics, full comic ranges, full books that you wouldn't even know existed because they were found piece by piece in different magazines across different times. This era was absolutely amazing. Sadly, it didn't perform that well considering the costs, and it didn't always get the best reviews, but for many fans, this was the peak of their childhood, coming home from school to watch a new episode of The Clone Wars. It was successful enough long-term that it led to spin-off works which were hugely influential in Disney Star Wars today, such as Ahsoka's novels, the Rebels spin-off series, and of course the live-action spin-off series Ahsoka, which is coming out and is pretty much the centerpiece of Disney Plus in the next couple of years. The character of Ahsoka is also so deeply important to the current Thrawn-related storyline which is being handled in the Heir to the Empire movie by Dave Filoni, so clearly it ignited a level of hype which still has its effects to this day. The post-prequel Dark Age. After years of financial struggles, George Lucas made the heartbreaking decision to sell Lucasfilm to Disney, marking the end of an era. This transition came at a cost, with the Clone Wars being abruptly cancelled, before it could reach its natural conclusion. Fans were left deeply hurt and frustrated as the series had become a key piece of Star Wars storytelling and lore, and its sudden cancellation left many of its arcs unfinished. This period was rough for Star Wars fans. A lot of planned projects fizzled out or were shelved indefinitely, leaving a content drought that made it hard for Disney to establish momentum. Hardcore Legends fans, already grieving the loss of their expanded universe stories, became vocal opponents of the sale. For them, George's decision to pass the torch felt like a betrayal, especially as their favorite tales were officially labeled non-canon shortly after Disney's purchase of the franchise. Star Wars wasn't dead, but it felt like it was on life support with no clear path forward. This era lasted pretty much from 2006 all the way up to 2012 when the purchase happened, and actually even further up until 2014 when Disney finally started producing new content in their new canon. This was the darkest of dark ages, and up until 2012 we didn't even know if Star Wars would ever continue again, or if Star Wars would ever have a new movie. After this comes the early canon lore gold rush. Things took a dramatic turn though when Disney announced its plans for a new Star Wars trilogy. The first teaser trailer for The Force Awakens dropped like a bombshell, racking up over 100 million views and reigniting the world's love for Star Wars. Everybody loved Star Wars. Suddenly, Star Wars was everywhere again. New shows like Star Wars Rebels brought in fresh stories to the table. A slew of new novels and comics began filling in the gaps, all interconnected with the larger narrative Disney was building. This era felt like a gold rush for fans hungry for new lore. The sheer amount of content made the galaxy feel more alive and expansive than it had in years. Speculation and theory crafting were at an all-time high as fans tried to piece together how it would all connect, and they were looking in every book, every comic for the next little piece of information as to what may happen in the next movie. This surge in excitement also brought a new wave of Star Wars YouTubers, including names like Star Wars Explained, Star Wars Theory, and Stupendous Wave, whose love for the franchise helped foster a growing online community. These guys, along with so many others, led the charge in Star Wars hype with Rey theories, Rey parentage theories, who was Snoke, so many other theories and lore and speculation. It was absolutely amazing. And as the hype grew, it all led to the revival of one of Star Wars' most beloved series, the Clone Wars Revival. The Clone Wars Revival era is probably actually near the peak of Disney Star Wars. And you have to remember, by this point, the prequels are still considered to be bad by the majority of vocal fans, and certainly by Disney themselves, who did everything possible to distance themselves from the prequels during the release of The Force Awakens, saying things like "this time will make things right" in the trailers. But suddenly, something changed, and it all began from a previously obscure subreddit known as r/prequel memes. These memes became incredibly popular and entered pop culture in a big way, as the young fans of the prequels began to get online and spread their love for the franchise through silly memes and lines from the prequels. And then, after years of fan demand, Dave Filoni announced that the Clone Wars would return for one final season. Fans lit up social media with speculation discussing how the series would tie up loose ends and provide a proper conclusion to George Lucas's decade-old project. The anticipation was intense, and when the final season dropped, it didn't disappoint. Well, maybe the middle arc did, but the first and the last arc were pretty good. The last arc in particular went down in history as some of the most emotional and impactful storytelling Star Wars had ever seen. This revival brought a sense of unity back to the fandom, especially for those who felt let down by the sequel trilogy's inconsistent storytelling. It was a love letter to the fans and a reminder of what made Star Wars special in the first place. Combined with other promising projects on the horizon, it felt like the franchise was back on solid ground and ready to move forward into the future after the disappointment of Solo and, of course, The Last Jedi. After this is the Mando era. The launch of The Mandalorian in 2019, alongside The Rise of Skywalker, marked a new golden age for Star Wars. The series was a hit right out of the gate, combining heartfelt storytelling with stunning visuals and a fresh yet familiar take on the galaxy far, far away. For many fans, it was the high point of the Disney era in Star Wars, and it quickly became the cornerstone of the franchise's future. Mando gave Disney an easy transition from blockbuster movies to streaming dominance, becoming one of the most watched shows of all time. Its success spun off new projects like the Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka shows, as well as the upcoming Heir to the Empire movie, solidifying its impact on the larger Star Wars universe. The excitement around The Mandalorian brought the fandom back to life, with theories and speculation flooding YouTube and social media once again, just like back in those early sequel trilogy days. Unfortunately, however, this renewed enthusiasm wouldn't last long because of one simple and horrible decision from Disney. And that decision leads us into the next era, the fandom wars. The firing of Gina Carano sparked a firestorm within the Star Wars community, splitting the fandom once again along political lines. Social media became a battleground, with fans engaging in heated arguments, online harassment, and even doxing. For some, the incident represented a larger issue with Disney's handling of the franchise, while others felt it was a necessary step in maintaining Disney's brand reputation. Adding to the tension came later divisive releases like The Acolyte, which alienated portions of the fanbase with its messaging and extremely agenda-focused plot. The overall drop in storytelling standards and the decline in cinematography in the newer projects, Kenobi, only worsened the already tense situation. The toxicity got so bad that somebody even turned to slander in order to attempt to demonetize and deplatform some of the biggest Star Wars creators, including Geeks and Gamers and Star Wars Theory. Now, whether you're on one side of the fandom with them or not, or the other, the fact is, I broke down the document in full detail with my good friend Coruscant Codex, and not a single one of the 20 claims of hate speech were true against these guys, and all of them were taken out of context in order to appear offensive when they really weren't. Although the intensity of these fandom wars has started to die down now because Star Wars is waning in popularity, and at this point people just don't care, the underlying tensions definitely still remain. Whether the franchise can heal these rifts or ignite new ones will depend on its next steps in storytelling and community engagement, which Disney will need to manage extremely carefully. So that's been the incredible rollercoaster that is the history of the Star Wars franchise in its many eras of Star Wars fandom. Which era were you a part of? Which era did you start Star Wars? And which era did you leave in? And what piece of media is your favorite from each era? Be civil in the comments below, but let's honor Star Wars' many years of history and our first memories. For me, it was the Clone Wars and Mando. What about you? If you enjoyed the video, slap a like on it, subscribe for more awesome Star Wars content, and check out Coruscant Codex's version of this video, which takes a look at the video game eras of the Star Wars franchise. If you made it this far, drop a thank Mr. Kiadimundi in the comments down below.